Hey everyone, how you doing today? My name is Kirsty, aka Beth Bookish, and we are back for another round of Are These Books Overhyped, Underhyped, or Perfectly Hyped? I've done this video twice, I want to say. Let me just check. I don't know. I think I've done this video at least once, if not twice. The premise of this is just to look at some books that I've read and then, you know, do I think they're over, under, whatever? And I think I've surprised a few people with a couple of them. For example, we all know how much I love Addie LaRue. It's one of my all-time favourite books, and yet I said that I think it's overhyped. And people were like, wait, what? And then there was a book that I DNF'd and I personally didn't enjoy that I said was really well hyped, and I agree with the hype even though I didn't enjoy that book. There's always a few curveballs and a few surprises in there. And this round, I think there's a few surprises. I don't know, we shall see. As before, I'm going to start with the overhyped books, then we'll talk about the books that I feel are well hyped and deserve the hype they get, and then we'll finish off with some books I think need more love and more... My notebook just collapsed. And then we'll end with books that I feel, you know, need more love and attention and could do with a bit more of hyping up because they're fantastic and I don't see enough people talking about them. Unsurprisingly, for the overhyped books, I only actually have two of them physically, and one of them will be leaving my library very soon because it is going to a new home and it is moving to a new country. Most of these books I've already unhauled and no longer have the physical copies of, but the first of these that I am starting with is going to be a doozy, and it's a big one, and that is the Cruel Prince trilogy by Holly Black. Did I finish them? No. I gave up halfway through the second book because it wasn't what I was promised. It wasn't enemies to lovers. It was a bully romance, and I do not like bully romances. Both of the characters were abhorrent. Her Jude's sister, whose name I can't even remember, was just such a whiny little... There wasn't a single character in this book that, in the book and a half that I read, that I thought was good, and nothing I've seen by Holly Black since has intrigued me in any way, shape or form. So I do think she's just not an author for me, but this series in particular, I think this was the very first big disappointment I had, because I started The Cruel Prince back at the very start of my YouTube journey, so mid 2019 I think I read it, and I had such high hopes. I was like, this is probably going to be my new personality, and instead I was like, what did I just read? Why have I just wasted my life? So yeah, I feel it's overrated and I feel like it's mismarketed. 99% of the hype I see about it is how it's enemies to lovers, and I'm like, it's not really. It's more of a... At most, it's a bully romance, and it involves a lot of blackmail and shitty behaviour that I don't feel is justified, and that to me is not really good enemies to lovers. That's a different kind of thing. The next book on this list is the Cursebreakers series by Bridget Kemmerer. I was mid with the first book. I was enjoying the second book, but then the very end of the second book did something I absolutely despise and set up the third book to basically just be the first book repeated, but with maybe a few extra characters, and I just was like, I wasn't here for it. And I did start the final book. I think I got a quarter of the way through it, and it just felt like nothing new was happening. And yeah, I remember this series being, maybe not so much now, but certainly back then, 3-4 years ago, it was everywhere and everyone had it on their shelves. And then when I've actually gotten around to reading it, I'm like, I don't understand the hype. It's a pretty mid-average YA. There was nothing for me other than the main character having a disability that we don't see very often, which I will still say is fantastic, but other than that, I don't feel it had any particularly unique elements to make it stand out and be as hyped as it actually was. Could just be a me thing, but just personally I think it was. Next book on the list, we have The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. This is again one I didn't finish the series, so obviously I am just judging this based off of the first book. But if you're writing a book and all of the best parts are at the very last sort of 5 to 10 pages, and you have thrown everything into a massive cliffhanger to keep people reading, you've not written a good book. The rest of this book was boring to forgetful. I remember just sort of sitting there scanning through the pages like, when is something interesting going to actually happen? And then suddenly the last like 5 pages, we get 3 or 4 big earth-shattering moments thrown at us with barely any context that's been built in through the book, and we're supposed to just accept that this is it, and that this thing that no one would have, well, few people might have predicted, but most people I know were like, it just came out of nowhere and didn't, even when you go back through the book, it's like nothing really gave it away. It's like, I don't mind when you throw a surprise at us, but if there is nothing in the book that's kind of implied that this could be a thing, I feel like it's just badly written. And I have heard from trusted sources that the second and the third book do the exact same thing, and you should not be baiting people in that way to just read your book for the final chapter. You need to keep my interest throughout the entire book or I'm not going to continue. We then have Uprooted by Naomi Novik. Now, I have forgotten quite a lot of the details of this book, but I do remember everyone was recommending it to me as being this incredible world building and that the magic is beautiful and the relationship is fantastic. But the biggest thing that people were telling me was just how beautifully written and well crafted the book is. And I was so bored the whole way through. And I remember not once liking the relationship in this book. I remember being very underwhelmed by the plot. The magic kind of didn't draw me in. And I think there's just something about Novik's writing style that I just didn't enjoy. And it's made me just not really interested to try anything else by her. Again, it's one of those books where I was just like, I clearly don't seem to have the same grasp on this book as everybody else. But then again, I love the Dark Shades of Magic trilogy and a lot of people feel that way about it. So, you know, everyone has their own taste, but on that one I was just kind of like, okay, where's the book that everyone promised me kind of thing. Next up we have one of my 2 that I said I've still got. The first of these is Terry Pratchett. I do still want to read this more, but this is the author rather than just the one single book, and it's the Discworld series, because honestly everyone lauds Terry Pratchett as being this absolute pioneer and this genius. And yet every single time I have picked one of his books up to read, I find myself confused and frustrated because I want to love his writing, but there's a difference between sort of whimsy and almost comedy and completely nonsensical and over the top and just too much. And I feel like quite often his writing goes too far for me. I have been told that more is the book that should grab me and should be the one that I love. So this is kind of my last attempt to try and get into his writing. But for some reason, when I prefer to watch the adaptations, they are so, I think it's something with Terry Pratchett's writing. It is absolutely perfect for adaptation. But when I try to read the book, I just can't seem to visualize what he's trying to say because he says it in such a weird and wacky way quite a lot of the time. Whereas when it's on TV, you can actually visualize and see what they're talking about, and I think it just brings the magic to life a little bit more for me. So the books, yes, I think are overhyped, but the adaptations I think are perfectly hyped. And then the final one for this is the one that I said is going to be moving to a new country. This is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, that hopefully by the time you all see this will now be sitting snugly on Jonah's shelves as part of a little box I'm sending to him for his house moving, purely because I just did not enjoy this. I see why a lot of people love this. Unfortunately for me, I felt that half of the book didn't need to be in the book, and the stuff that I wanted to focus on and the stuff that I wanted to really dive deeply into and really invest in ended up being kind of like the sprinkles on top instead of being the main cake. And the subject and the thing that the book is about ended up not really having the biggest part to play in the book. And I didn't like the fact that half of this book was more about the main character's backstory and things that I felt were relevant, yes, but explained far too much and ended up taking away enjoyment for the book. So Unfortunately, I just didn't have the best of times, and I would rather this move on to someone who I think will love it than stay sat on my shelves as a trophy. But now that means that the negative is done, so let's start talking a little bit more about the books that I think are perfectly appropriately hyped and I think deserve the hype that they get, and I fully back the hype train. And we are starting with one of the surprises that I mentioned, which is One Piece. I don't normally put manga in here, but I had to throw this in, especially with how much I was like, I will never read One Piece, I have no interest in it, it's too much, it's too long, I just don't care, to deciding to watch the live action because I am a sucker for a really good trailer, and the trailer made me a bit emotional, so I was like, okay, let's give it a try. The show ended up being fantastic, and I am now 13 volumes, which I know is still a tip of the iceberg. That's like a 10th of the overall series. But I have the next 6 volumes waiting for me upstairs, so I'm definitely enjoying it, and the more I'm reading it, the more I'm getting on board of the hype train, and I'm like, yep, okay, choo choo, sign me up, get me a ticket, I'm on board, I'm never getting off this train. Honestly, this is so good. I definitely can now see where the hype is and why it has done so well, and I just hope it continues to be fantastic as I continue my journey. Another one I think is Wayward by Amelia Hart. This one actually won the debut novel category in the Goodreads Choice Award in 2023. I agree with it. People who read these types of books quite often have maybe not said it's that great, but for people like me who don't tend to read a lot of sort of, you know, generational stories or magical realism or literary fiction, I don't tend to read any of those things, and this is kind of all three of those woven together. I had a fantastic time. It's got some of the most beautiful quotes in here. I really loved the writing in this. I thought it was beautiful. I don't normally like lyrical, but I am discovering that certain books I can do lyrical, and it was quite a lyrical book, and I did really enjoy it in the end. The next one is another one that is possibly going to be a bit of a surprise because I didn't expect to enjoy this book and ended up giving it 5 stars, and it is currently my best book of the year, and I think is going to be an extraordinarily strong contender for book of the year, and that is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. Did not expect to enjoy this. Because I'd seen critique on it about how bad the writing is and how it's just a bit rubbish, I was expecting to not enjoy this at all. What I did not expect was to be laughing, swooning, and falling in love with a pair of serial killers as they fell in love. Did not expect that in any way, shape or form. The banter between Sloane and Rowan was just incredible. It definitely was a book that isn't like stuff that I normally read, so that probably had an element in there of why I enjoyed it so much, because it's not the same as what I would normally read. But honestly, yes, it wasn't the most well crafted, it wasn't the most well written, but it was such a fun time, and it didn't take itself too seriously, and that I think is what it did right. I think if it had tried to be a serious book, it wouldn't have worked. But the fact that they had a bit of a play and they had this little banter going on, it was just so fun. It was chaotic, but in the best kind of way. And yeah, I had a great time. I really did enjoy it. And it was just a fun book to just switch my brain off for a couple of days and just dive into. And I've been left desperate to get to the rest of this series. So now that both of the sequels are out in the next month or two, I plan on getting them and just binging them. I'm only going to do one more for this category, and that is because this one and then the first one in the next category are both translated fics, so I thought I'd put them together. I call them cozy contemporaries. A lot of them tend to have magical realism in there as well, but many translated fics, there's kind of been a big boom in people reading, you know, these cozy, wholesome, you know, feel good slice of life magical realism translated fics that have been coming mostly from Japan and Korea, but there are other ones as well that are coming through. But the primary ones that I've seen have been Japanese or Korean authors. So I've got one that I think is appropriately and one that I think is underhyped and could do with more readers. So the one that I think is appropriately hyped is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. If you've been around, you know I've talked about this quite a few times now, so you're probably sick of hearing me saying the same things over again. But if you are new here, this book started off almost as a DNF for me. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it. I didn't think I was going to get on with it. By the end of it, I was an absolute blubbering mess and gave it 5 stars because of the emotional impact it had. I definitely think it is a slow build. It's not one that's going to grab you immediately, but it's definitely got a very heavy emotional impact, and for that I think it's appropriately hyped. However, going on to the books that I think deserve a bit more hype and a bit more attention, we have The Lantern of Lost Memories. This is one, you know, I've seen the Dalagut department store, I've seen Dam bookstore, I've seen Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Morisaki Bookshop. Those tend to be very heavily plugged. I had never heard of this one, and currently I've never seen anyone talking about this, but I read it when I was in Australia, or more when I was in the air traveling across and away from Australia. But this one, it's set in basically limbo in between Earth and Heaven, and it's a place that when you die you have to pick a photo, one photo for every year of your life, and you can choose to retake any one of those photos. So you get to go back into that moment, relive the memory, take the photo, and then at the end of it, it gets all put onto this lantern. The lantern spins, you get to see a little video of your life, and then at the end you move on. And we follow 3 different characters and their stories, and we learn about them, and it just was so beautifully written. There was a really wonderful moment at the end that I'm not going to talk about, but there was such a beautiful moment, not only with the 3 of the characters, but also with the I can't remember his name, Mr. Hirasaka, who is helping them and is the one that's kind of guiding them through this process. We get a moment with him, and I was just like, my heart just exploded. And this one was so beautiful and I loved it, and it's definitely one that I plan on rereading, and I would love to get more from this author if she has released anything. Before the Coffee Gets Cold was emotional in terms of like the storyline and where it deals with a lot of grief. This one, weirdly, despite being about death, it felt more like a book celebrating life, and I loved that. It was just so pretty and so beautiful. The next one that I am going to talk about is another one that I have mentioned a few times on this channel. I do talk about it being an all-time favourite, but I still feel like it's not very well hyped, and even though it's an older series now, I still feel like a lot of people would get a great kick out of it, especially people who prefer those kind of like darker romances and fae, and prefer the kind of like darker urban fantasy, and that is the Fever series by Cara Marie Moaning. It features our main character Mac, whose sister is killed while she is studying over in Ireland. Mac then, after the authorities are like, there's nothing more we can do, Mac goes, this isn't good enough, I'm going to go over and resolve it myself. Only she discovers that she has these abilities and that she is actually a she-seer, which is someone who basically fights and defeats the Fae. And it turns out that her sister also had this ability, and that is ultimately what led to her being killed. So she discovers this whole world she didn't even know existed, and along the way is introduced to Jericho Barons, who is the biggest asshole on the planet. He treats her like shit. Like, he does physically assault her when they first meet, as a way to like show her, you are a little girl in a big city, you need to leave. At first it's kind of like he's trying to discourage her and tell her to go home, but then as soon as he realizes her true abilities and what she can do, he's like, actually you're now mine and you're staying with me, you're basically now my Fae detector. And she's like, ah, hell fucking no. And the two of them just have this like hate relationship where they just despise each other, and it is a slow burn, because even though throughout this they despise each other, they also have this insane sexual tension as well, and it's just incredible. It's the most toxic as fuck relationship you can think of, and it is not a relationship that you should ever aspire to have, but do I lap it up every single time because I love their banter? Yes. Also, Mac, I will warn at the start, she is awful. I hate her. She is so self-centered and so materialistic. She's like, me, 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 I'm so pretty, and all of this. but I will say by the end of the series, she grows the fuck up and becomes a badass. So if you like to see sort of that kind of dynamic in a relationship, but also see a main character go from being absolute trash to a gem, you want to read this. The next one is one that I think quite a lot of people were talking about, but I've seen more negative stuff about it, and I personally disagree. I don't have the first book, so I'm going to hold up the second book, but that is the Fable series, so I have Namesake. But the Fable duology, I really love, because even though it was about pirates and it's about sea, like things to do with the ocean and the seas and the voyages and stuff like that, a lot of people's complaint about this was that it wasn't piratey enough and like arr enough. For me, I liked the fact that it didn't go with the typical tropes of piracy, and it actually focused more on the different roles within a ship rather than just pirates, swords, fighting, treasure, arr. It had more, yes, there was a thing with treasure, but it was more about the dynamics between people on a ship, and it was about the different roles on a ship. And ultimately the story is about Fable's complicated relationship with her dad, but the journey she goes on through that I thought was really beautifully written. And I don't know, I really liked this one. I don't normally like pirate and boat books, but this one was done in a way that was so different to anything else I've read. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Daughter of the Pirate King, but if I had Daughter of the Pirate King and Fable and I could only choose to keep one, I would probably go for Fable, because I just was more invested in the story and I loved the world building in this. I think people go into this expecting it to be a bit more sort of adventure and like fighty and a little bit more intense, when it's actually a sort of more gentle story. And like I said, it's more about connections and relationships rather than action, treasure and all of that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a great time, and I really want to get Fable so I can do a reread of the series. The next one I'm going to talk about, I haven't yet read the second book, but the first one I do really want to reread again at some point, and I have talked about before, but that is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. This is an absolutely gorgeous book. It's set kind of just after the Civil War, and it's kind of a real historical events in an alternate Earth where there is magic. So we've got the events of the Civil War, slavery has just ended, and we've got this couple who throughout the sort of time of slavery, they both acted as part of like the railroad to help people escape and to help get people away from their owners and stuff like that, to help people escape that situation. And now that we're post all of that, they're trying to sort of find where they belong in this new world and this new society. But along the way, there's a series of murders that start to happen in their sort of town or city. I can't quite remember. It's been about 4 years now since I read this. Maybe even 5 years now. But what I do remember is that it's black people that have started to be murdered. So they start to look into it and uncover a bunch of stuff that's going on there. So it's a bit of a murder mystery. But the thing I love the most about this is the relationship between the characters, because they are married, but it's definitely a marriage of convenience. At the start of the book, they're just kind of almost not even friends. They're just, you know, two people who needed to get married, they got married, and now they're just living together. But we start to see throughout the book, you start to see them genuinely fall in love, and it is the most beautiful unfolding of a love story that you can get. It's not kind of, in a lot of these stories, it tends to be that the woman's always getting into trouble and has to be saved by the man. And it's very equal in this one. He gets into situations and she protects him. She gets into situations and he protects her. And gradually they both mutually start to fall in love and realise that they are no longer just pretending to be married. And oh, I love it. And I also adore the magic system in this, because it's more like celestial magic, and the way that they use their magic is that they draw out the constellations. So for example, when they draw Leo, a lion springs from the magic and basically tears whoever's in front of it to pieces. There's when they use Taurus, a bull comes out and will just like smash through walls, and the magic is just so gorgeous. I fell in love with it, and it started me really wanting to read more Celestial Magic. Have I since read more Celestial Magic? No, but I'm still very interested in it. And then the final one for this one is another one that I've talked about a lot. We all know I love this author. Will I ever stop loving this author? I doubt it. But of their books, there's one that gets nearly all of the hype. There's one that gets almost no hype whatsoever, but I do kind of agree because I think it was quite a weak book. But then there's one that gets very little hype and yet I think is the better of the books, and that is The Sunbearer Trials by Aidan Thomas. We know I absolutely love this series. Sunbearer Trials got 5 stars from me both times I read it. Celestial Monsters did get 4.5 because it wasn't quite on the same level, but certainly in terms of LGBT rep, world building, and the banter between friends in particular is just top notch for me. I love the cast of characters in this. I love the world building. I love how this is a sort of queer normative world, and the acceptance and the love that everyone has is just fantastic. There's stakes involved. There's really well written lore. I think it's fantastic, and yet I don't see people hyping this anywhere near as much as they should. So, you know, if you are wanting to dip your toe into fantasy and you've enjoyed things like The Hunger Games or Percy Jackson, but you want something that's maybe a bit more queer, you need to read these. So there you have it. There are some books that I think are under, over, or appropriately hyped. Let me know in the comments if you agree or even disagree with anything, but remember to please keep it civil because at the end of the day, everyone has their own opinions on things. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all good. I hope you're staying safe, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!